I'd rather create something that others criticise than create nothing and criticise others.
If you have high quality product behind the bar, it's like a weapon.
It's not about the figures, it's about who those figures are.
The Hospopreneurs Podcast.
I'm going to drink this beer.
Yeah, let's crack them.
With James Henderson.
Hello and welcome to episode 52 of the Hospopreneurs Podcast. Phillip Jones has been writing and educating about craft spirits since 2012 via his popular website, The Martini Whisperer. Phillip is a TEDx speaker on the cultural history of the martini and frequently runs masterclasses across Australia. He's a national judge for the Australian Tourism Awards and associate member of the Australian Distillers Association. He gives us an incredible amount of value today, and I hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome to the show, Phillip.
Hey, good to talk to you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, mate. Thank you for joining us today. As you know, the first question I like to ask is, what's your crazy hospitality story?
Now, back in the day, I had a 12-year career running restaurants all around the world. I ended up being like a fine dining manager in London and Scotland and Canada and, of course, different parts around Australia. So I've kind of dropped everything, spilled everything, forgotten everything, but in a good way could do. But I think must be serving Annie Lennox breakfast in bed. Must be a highlight. So they came to Canberra. This is when they were Rivnik. So I was still at uni working my way, and I used to do the graveyard shift, the room service graveyard shift. And you got to see a lot doing that, by the way. And anyway, so everyone's making a fuss about Annie Lennox and Dave Stewart staying in the hotel, and I was just going, yeah, what if? And it was my turn to take the breakfast tray up to them. So I was all kind of jaded and cynical by then, at the old age of 19 or something. Knocked on the door, and she was under the name of Miss White, and he was under the name of Dr. Doom down the hall. They had different rooms. Miss White, and this is a true story. She opened up the door, and she's like Kylie Minogue height. She's tiny, 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 tiny. I used to serve Kylie Minogue in Sydney quite a lot. Anyway, she's about 5 foot nothing, and she just had this little t-shirt on, probably not much else, had this million watt smile, just kind of, hi, just a good morning kind of, and I went, just melted. And instead of saying, oh, where would you like the tray, madam, I kind of said, where would you like me? And she laughed. She took it pretty well. It just sort of came out. I couldn't help myself. She just had this immense charisma, as you'd probably expect. And I was just like, la, 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 what the rest of the day, really. It's quite
That's fantastic.
True story.
I like that too. Obviously, you mentioned in that answer you used to serve Kylie Minogue too.
Yeah, so there's a restaurant in Sydney called the Bavis Pavilion. Along many other people sort of worked there, were in front of house there, and it was one of those cool spots for celebrities, because we never, unlike me, but Annie Lennox, never made a fuss over them. So it was very chilled out kind of vibe, and they could just feel really comfortable and relaxed, even in the main restaurant. So you get people from Patrick Stewart and Brian Ferry and George Miller and everybody who would come to Sydney would come. So she would actually have like a weekly lunch for a while there when she was in town, and she was just gorgeous. And so I don't know, one day for a tip she just gave me a kiss on the cheek, and I was a happy man.
Fantastic. So Phillip, I like to sort of, after this crazy hospitality story, I like to go super macro and ask why you do what you do, what it is that really inspires you about hospitality.
That's a great question. A couple of things. And it stays true even though I'm indirectly involved now in my current incarnation. But I think it's three things. One is each day, each shift is complete in and of itself. So unlike a lot of jobs, because I do a lot of consulting and other things now, it kind of drags on over months and months. In hospitality, the shifting and what you're doing in that particular shift is the focus. And it's complete in and of itself. And when it all comes together, it's a beautiful thing. You finish your shift and you just think, that was a good service. We really nailed that. Or that wasn't so great, but we'll do it again better next time. And so that sense of closure is a pretty rare thing to get in work, and you can get a really high degree of satisfaction. The other thing would be the camaraderie. I loved the fact that you work your guts out, but also you work your guts out together. And so I'll, still come bump into people, because I was, 20 years ago or something, now, bump into people who are still in the game. And you still got the privileges, and you still got the mutual respect, and you still got the camaraderie and the history there, and that never goes away. And that's a pretty great thing to have in a profession. And the other thing, of course, is you're in the business of making people happy. And it doesn't matter whether I was talking, dealing with movie stars or whatever, or just taxi drivers coming in for the 25th wedding anniversary. They all got, in a way, treated the same. And it meant a great deal to be able to make their night or their lunch, whatever it was, special. A very gratifying thing to do. So that sense of service and true hospitality has never really left me. That's the thing I've always loved.
So yeah, the reason I ask why is because as you know, I like to go super macro before I go into like micro, detail oriented, work related, a bit more sort of how you do what you do. Tell us about what you're building, the Martini Whisperer, how we connected, things like that.
I'll say up front, I'm really quite surprised I'm in the space I am now, in a good way. I've had so many adventures and doors open on the back of, frankly, the Martini. It's almost embarrassing in its riches. But there's something about it, which I'll get to, that really resonates with people. But the idea is to be much the same, and I'll work backwards a little bit. So the other night, it was World Martini Day during the week, and it's a bit like Christmas for me, comes early, and I hosted an event with a local restaurant to celebrate it. So I kind of created a martini especially for the occasion, and people came all dressed up, and I did a little demonstration. But the real point of the story is that twofold. One was everyone was best friends by the end of the night, who had never met before. After a couple of martinis, it tends to do it to you. And I was like introducing myself to everybody and made sure everyone was really engaged. And just all that hospitality ethos, was very front and center. I wanted people not just to pay the money and sit in a quiet corner. I actually want them to engage and have a great time. And people to kind of look for those clues and behaviour. They're looking for an excuse. They've made all the effort to turning up, but again, they need a way in to just even open up amongst themselves. And the second one was, working with the team in the restaurant. So getting behind the bar and working with them and all that stuff came back. And I have such respect for people who are still in the industry day in, day out. I mean, I can make a great drink, but I don't need to make 50 great drinks under pressure and all the rest of it. So it was great to have that kind of vibe coming back. Anyway, point of the story is that's kind of one facet, this sort of public persona and event where the Martini Whisperer now is got a fair bit of head of steam around it. So way back when, can I tell you the genesis story, if you like, because it builds to this. Canberra had a 100th birthday, so we're talking about 2012, thereabouts. And part of their program, Robin Archer was the creative director of the program, and she had a really great idea. Besides the big official functions, like the parades and the ceremonial hoo-ha, she really wanted the Canberra community to reveal itself, because Canberra is an introvert. We all know it's kind of cold and winter time and not much goes on, but really it's an introvert. And so it's got a really rich inner life. And the hospitality scene here has just exploded the last 5 years. It's just amazing. And you'll feel like you're in bits of Melbourne and Sydney and Brisbane even, when you come down and experience it, because the whole dynamic's changed. But anyway, before that was able to happen, she wanted Canberra and the industry to really reveal itself for its creativity. So they put the word out going, put your hand up if you want to do something for the program. And it could be anything from a street party to something in your local shops, doesn't matter. Anyway, my routine on a Friday night after finishing work was to have a martini or two to start the weekend properly in style. So I was on Twitter at the time, and I had a tipsy tweet, in response. I tweeted, I'll do one. I'll make the official martini for Canberra, says me under an influence of my second martini. Anyway, that went out to about 50 people and on my account. Anyway, one of those 50 was the official centenary account, and they retweeted to like 50,000 people, and they said, "Oh, it's awesome, Phillip. Great. We can't wait to try it." I went, heck, I've got to make it now. Now, this is where timing's really interesting, because I thought, well, it's got to have all Australian ingredients. And at the time, unlike now, there was hardly anybody making an Australian product. There was West Winds, there was Moores in New South Wales, a couple of other guys in New South Wales. So West Winds, like I said, over in WA, a couple of the new emerging whiskey makers. But that was about it. And Maid and I have moved out of Melbourne. So I reached out to everybody, and West Winds kind of explained. They didn't know me from a bar, so I was just some schmuck on the end of an email. Hadn't had a brand, no website, nothing, none of this at this point. And West Winds and Maid and I have moved. Said, yep, that sounds like a great idea. We'll get behind that. Long story cut short, it just snowballed. So next thing I got a media event with the Chief Minister and the Minister for the Arts. We had a media event, people turned up. The Western Australian turned up because of the West Wind gin connection. So it was the best thing to come out of Canberra for a decade. And then the next thing, I got a big black tie ball at the National Press Club. We were raising money for a charity. I got a glass artist to make a bespoke cocktail set. And one thing led to another. And we had a great old night, and it was really successful. So in 5 seconds flat, next thing was happening was all these spirits being sent to me for a review. Somehow the word got around, and I'm being sent the new wave of craft spirits as they emerged around Australia. And so had to get a website going, had to get my social going. And because I got the hospitality background, I've got an extra grind, they kind of appreciated the fact that I just had a very independent voice. I just loved the product, but more importantly, I love what they were trying to do. And so in pretty quick order, in the space of a few years, the website's has gone ballistic. I've got great contributors from around the world now, adding their voices to the mix. And so that's sort of one side of the equation. And then the other side of the equation is events. So hosting gin appreciation classes or whiskey master classes or craft spirit appreciation events or, how to make a martini type of soirees and or World Gin Day degustation dinners for 100 people, and so it goes. So I've been able to extend the brand, if you like, to use that parlance into lots of different spaces. I'll do events for corporate clients. So they want a special VIP function, so I'll create a cocktail especially for the occasion and talk to that. And so it goes. So it's been really quite amazing. Just phone call and emails going, how about this, and would you be able to do this, and so forth. And I've got other adventures to share, which we'll get to, I'm sure. But again, when I sit back and think where I'm now to where I was even just a few years ago, I'm really quite bemused at how it's all evolved.
Yes, and I notice in that answer that it is very consumer oriented, and so it's a voice connecting industry and the consumer in a different way.
That's exactly right, James. I think that's the part I have to play in the whole scheme of things. People in the industry, I was in the distilling industry, for example, they're always going to do what they're going to do. And quite often I'll meet distillers who, I won't say they won't have a business plan as such, but they're just passionate about it. Like they're kind of part chemist, part engineer, part mad scientist. And they're just passionate about what they are and the place they live in and the chemical reactions they can create and the romance of it as well. I mean, they work their guts out. They work harder than anybody else I know. But the last thing often they think about is how to sell the stuff or how to market it. And if you're an objective business person, probably the last thing you do right now is start a distillery in Australia, because the capital costs are so big, but there are so many players. There's nearly 200, maybe more, Australian distillers in Australia now, and they get a market share of 2-3% of the spirits market. So clearly they're not all going to survive. But anyway, that's not the point right now. So where I sit in the mix of things of the people who are making the product and the people who are keen to engage with and consume it, but in a sensible way. And so people will come to me and go, well, we loved your idea of Australian gin, but how do we drink it? Or we do respect the product, but they don't want to break it. So that's where people like myself or my other contributors can come in to make, so here's a really nice way to appreciate the spirit, or this is a way you can make a martini out of it, or so it goes. I'm actually helping a local distiller refining their recipe as a consultant to that, and we sat back and looked at the survey. We surveyed all the spirits around, well, actually gin. We're designing a gin, and looked at an opportunity in the spectrum of flavour profiles in the market. And so we've taken a slightly different approach in terms of we want him to have his own voice in terms of the flavour profile, but we're also very mindful of where the opportunities are in the market and designing it accordingly. So I'm trying to practice what I preach just a little bit there. But you're right, that's kind of where I sit. And in the events, likewise. So if I do a craft spirit appreciation, most of the time people have never had an Australian product before. And so there's so many great stories to tell about these people who make them and where they come from and the place that inspires them. And that's just fantastic to be able to share that with people. So I don't get kickbacks, from anybody. I maintain my independence. If I get a bottle review, I'll declare it. I don't make money out of selling spirits, besides the consulting from now and again.
With your consulting, is there an equity basis if they're an early stage company, or is it just fee for service?
It's a fee for service, yeah, because I want to maintain my position as being independent. And so I do keep a bit of professional distance. I've got good relationships with distillers, but I'm not going to ever be best buddies with them because I want to maintain that perspective. I think I can add more value that way, if you like. Other people can get a bit carried away, enthusiastic in a relationship, shall we say. So I maintain that. So that's a fee for service, and they've engaged me to do certain things. At the end of the day, it's still their product and his call to make, how he wants it to go. But I'll get the benefit of my experience and so forth. So, and other things I can do around that. And other times it might be as simple as people will send me a prototype to try. It might be something for review for the website, or sometimes we're just working on what do you think, and I'll just give them some honest feedback, and it's kind of off the grid that way, so to speak. It just depends on the scale of the work, but that's kind of how I work.
I totally understand what you're saying there. Obviously, being independent is something that I really value about what I'm doing, and I don't want to be partnered with any specific brand because I feel like it devalues what I'm doing. So I need to remain independent. I mean, not to say that brands can't get behind what I'm doing and promote what we're doing through Hospopreneurs, but and similarly for you, I'm sure that you wouldn't be, adverse to an event with a sponsor, but then again, it's not going to be, the entire thing isn't going to be backed by that.
That's exactly right, James. And people do appreciate it, and the distillers appreciate it too. Not blowing my own trumpet, but people will go, well, we want Phil to talk about this, or we want Philip's opinion on such and such because he's in no one's pocket, so to speak. And again, I know my limitations. I don't want to make huge claims on myself, but that's the sort of feedback I get, so that people can go, well, look, because he is, he's independent, we actually respect what he has something to say. So that's a really great position to be in, but it's something I've got a very careful regard of.
In your answer there, just before, like with the previous one, before I sort of added onto it, you advise that people don't open another distillery in Australia. When you referred to spirits, I know that when you said 2-3% of the market, you were talking about gin. What can people do? You sort of provided a bit of an answer. I want you to elaborate on that a little bit more. What can they do if they've already started a distillery? They're really passionate about gin. They're making gin and they want to sell their product. How do you advise they move forward? Obviously, this is something that you're paid for. So, whatever answer you'd like to provide. But how could someone on a cursory level do that?
It's a tricky one, and I apologise for anybody who's already started spending money on the project. It's a business. Be very clear. My free advice would be things on these lines. Be clear in a sense in your own mind about what you want to achieve. Are you going to be the next Bombay or Tanqueray? Probably not, unless you've got the money and the long-term vision to back that up over a decade or more. If you just got if a romance or a passion project, then that's great. Go for it, absolutely. But scale your business and scale your costs and your operation to support that, because it's really, really hard into market. We'll step back a bit. So Australian spirits are probably the highest taxed in the world. So the excise is about 33%, top of my head, for a bottle. So if you walk into a bottle shop and on any given, and people like, shameless plug, Dan Murphy's of the world, they actually do a really good job of supporting Australian spirits. So when you walk in, there's a gin shelf, and you might have 50 Aussies. I think my local one's got about 50 Aussies there, and another 50 or so imported gins. But because the tax difference is so, I see these people, I watch them in the shop, and they're going, I love your idea of, Australian spirits, but it's like $30-40 more expensive than the one from England. And that's for all sorts of different reasons. Partly the ones are being subsidised, but mainly because the excise and tax. So if you buy a bottle of gin for $90, $80, a third of that is excise, plus the GST, plus whatever. So that's a hard one to come across. People love the idea, but the price point is deterring people. That's again when people like me come in the mix or whatever to try and encourage people to recognise the craft and the skill and the unique flavours that Australian producers make, and the quality is there to justify the price point, but there is a resistance there. So the point being that if you're going to go into this market, you've got a structural challenge from the get-go in terms of price point. So there's that. But then you've just got a whole plethora of how do you get your brand out there and all the rest of it. So I wouldn't underestimate the challenges. Now, if you're just going to make a product and do your 500 bottles, every few months, and you're happy with a local distribution and you find your way to the market and you're just happy to say, I make gin and this is fantastic, or vodka or whatever you want to do, then that's fine. If that's sustainable for you, that's great. But be realistic. If you want to scale up and go to, when I meet some of these other bigger players, they're already thinking about international markets, because I realise it's going to be very hard to grow the local market against that sort of structural limitation and competition. Long answer cut short would be eyes wide open with the challenges and be prepared to play the long game and be realistic about the scope of your ambitions. By all means, go for it, but don't expect to be the next Bombay Sapphire or Tanqueray anytime soon, because there's some real challenges in front of anybody bringing a spirit to market, I reckon, in Australia. It even comes up in, I don't want to the sign because I know you're based in Brisbane, but I hear stories about Sydney operations. I was doing research for a project and trying to find Australian spirits in bars around Sydney, CBD. And with a few honourable exceptions, they're actually quite hard. And you wouldn't think it would be that hard to add an extra bottle or two to a shelf. But there's all sorts of incentives and stuff I get told about, or just resistance of people to try something new, which is paradoxical, because I know if I was going to go to a bar, or people go to a bar, tourists come to a bar, they want to try the local stuff. If you've got an international city like Sydney, Hobart's got better, apparently. They're now getting behind the local product more than they used to. And so if you've got a tourist coming to Hobart, come from somewhere else, whether interstate or internationally, they'd want to have a local product. They come for local food, so why not? What's the local whiskey? What's the local gin? What's telling the story of that? And that's where the ecosystem of the bars are really critical. So having really great relationships with the restaurants and bars where you're at will be a really critical success factor, I reckon, because they're the ones who are going to be the ambassadors, informal ambassadors for your brand.
Well, you got places like Bad Frankie in Melbourne too, and it's only Australian spirits as well. So I totally understand what you're talking about. Are you saying that venues like that emerge in an international city, or they should emerge in an international city, or is that just a correlation you've seen?
Bad Frankie, to their credit, was way ahead of the curve. before any of this was going on. So they were the first to do it, and they should be acknowledged as such. But I think any sort of decent premium cocktail bar should have a range of Australian spirits in it. The price points aside and the wholesale costs aside, there's such great stories behind them that it's a really great way to engage the customer, as opposed to, picking an international label off the shelf and making a drink out of it. And so the opportunity is there to really have a better customer experience if the people chose to stock that product. But for whatever reason, and I hear stories from makers, they just can't get good distributors. They find it really hard to get their product in the local market. I was talking to a distiller in Adelaide a few weeks back, and he makes great stuff, really interesting product, wins awards, all sorts of stuff, and he just finds it just physically difficult to get the time away from his day job and his distilling job to sit down and talk to a restaurateur or talk to a bar owner and say, have a sip of this and get into your bar. The sheer physical graft of having to do that and the time it takes to do that is another barrier. And so you've got a lot of these operators that small 1 or 2 or 3 person operations. They have those sort of just distribution challenges, branding challenges. So it could be that the bars are interested, but there's another link in the chain that isn't working too well for the makers.
It made me think when you say makers, it reminded me there's a Brisbane bar called Maker that's also does local spirits too. But I want to, for the sake of time, I want to crack on, get a little bit further. Would you like to elaborate a bit on the TEDx talk you did?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It's a highlight of my life, but also was critical in the way I kind of built the Martini Whisperer brand. And the paradox about a TED talk, so this is TEDx Canberra a few years back now, is that they invite you because you're passionate. They invite people in the community because they're passionate about their subject. They're not professional guest speakers. Now, I do a lot of guest speaking for a profession, so I've got a bit of an advantage, but it completely messed with my head because they want you to be completely natural, as if you're just getting up and having a chin wag for 17 minutes. But yet again, it's a TED talk. So you've got the dot you're standing on, you've got the audience in front of you, you've got a countdown clock you can't go over, you're not allowed to have notes, and you have to really, really know your stuff, and you can't make stuff up on the fly. And so my theme was the culture history of Martini, and they give you a performance coach, they give you a speech coach to get you over the line. Quick story is that I was the last speaker of the day. And so you sit on the audience, you're not backstage in a green room or nothing, you sit in the audience and everyone's just amazing, right? Everyone's just like these world-class thinkers and doers and changing society, and here's it all me to talk about the Martini. And, you just get emotionally drained by the end of the day, of course, and you think, oh, these guys are amazing, I'm going to completely suck. And I did have some little cheat sheet notes or dot point, microscopic 8-point font, and I lost those. And I got to the end of the day and I just couldn't remember what my talk was. And I must have done it 50 times. Rehearsed it, filmed it, videoed, I took it really seriously. And now it's Phillip Jones, yay! And I had to get on the stage and I had nothing. I had nothing. But I had the first line, my tale was a heady mix of geopolitics, da-da-da-da. And once I got that first line out, all the rest came. All the muscle memory kicked in of all that practicing. You get a monitor to see your slides, and that died, so I couldn't see the slides behind me. They'll just see illustrations of martinis. But I had to land a certain point in the talk, and I don't want to spoil it for people because it's a bit of a TED first. But I had to have there's lots of moving parts to my talk because I wanted to make it a bit of an occasion to remember. But it all came together great, thank goodness. But on the back of that, so many doors have opened up. And once you're part of this TEDx community, then they're really gorgeous, altruistic people, and so you get all sorts of invitations and offers, and it's really kind of opened up doors that I can't really, can't calculate how valuable that's been. So if the opportunity comes up, it puts you through the ringer, but take it, absolutely take it.
Yeah, fantastic. I'll obviously link. You didn't tell us the point for the reason that you'd like us to watch, so I'll link that in the show notes as well.
There's a reveal towards the end there, so it's worth a watch.
Awesome. Also, you were on, is this right, Real Housewives of Melbourne?
Yeah, I'm still in therapy about that, James. So I was working in Melbourne for a couple of years, and the producer of the Matchbox Productions somehow got my number. They were having one of the characters, one of the people, the women in the shows, this season 2. There's an article about it on my website if people want to drill down a bit. Now, I should say up front, I ended up on the cutting room floor mostly, but on a Thursday, they called me up for a shoot on a Monday. And they said they wanted all these bespoke cocktails and craft spirits, and the whole party was a James Bond martini party. So that's what I got in touch with me. And it was absolutely fascinating. So it was all set in one of the ladies' houses at a holiday mansion in the Mornington Peninsula overlooking the bay. Just a spectacular house. And they set me up with a bar, and I had all my spirits, and I was supposed to have waiters and staff to make all the drinks. There's about 30, 40 people coming, like glamour kind of setup. crew about 50, I reckon. They had drones, of course. They had like 4 cameras. They had still photographers. The whole box and dice, right? So I must have got there about midday, do my prep. The shooting was going to start at 5 to about 10 that night. So quite a big day. Got myself all organised, and there's some shots there behind the scenes shots on my website I put up. But the thing was, 2 things. One was how stage managed it all was, the reality TV show. So there was an episode where they come up to the bar and I'm sort of mic'd up, and the producer goes, "Okay, Phil, let's make small talk while, Gina and such, whatever." And underneath, behind the bar, is like a production assistant. So she was out of shot, but she would feed questions and lines to the people. Goes, "Gina, ask about such and such, and ask about such and such." I shouldn't be saying this; it's really naughty. Just to try and get a reaction and stuff. So the scenarios are all kind of set up in the episode, and they're just trying to provoke a fight, basically, and a bit of angst and God knows what else. And my job, I was supposed to make all these great cocktails, and I did all that, but in the day, they didn't use it all. Didn't use it, unfortunately. You see the back of my head a little bit, and they called for shots, which was really embarrassing. So that's my first and only time in my life I've ever served shots. Great experience, however, but I did feel slightly unclean.
You've obviously never worked in a nightclub.
No,
Oh my gosh. I started writing a book on shots, on shot recipes. So I've definitely served a few of those before. But that's a story for another time. What I'm getting is some really interesting points on if we look at it depending on how you use your terminology, on a deeper level or on a macro, I use the word macro, but on a larger scale level with your answer and even the way you've branded yourself and how you're building your business or businesses, because it's multifaceted, is that you've really honed in on the Martini, obviously, and being the Martini Whisperer is your label. Can you tell us about why you've honed in on specifically the Martini, or has it just emerged? Like, is it a strategic plan or obviously you, from the beginning, you explained the cocktail that you made and how you just enjoyed martinis. Has it been a very strategic choice for you to go down the road of developing your brand as when everyone thinks Martini, they think Phillip? Or is it a bit more free form and you're just like, oh, this has emerged, let's just take a couple of steps and then see where I am, and then take a couple of steps and see where I am?
It's more the latter, quite honestly, James, because you couldn't think of a business plan going, let's make a business plan around the Martini and see what happens. But there is something very iconic about there's the glamour of the cocktail. There's the cultural references of the cocktail. It evokes so many different things that is appealing to people, both men and women. And when I look at my Instagram followers and my Facebook followers demographic, it's a pretty even split, which is interesting. And it provides a way in for people to engage with the spirits, because it's a bit, cheeky, and it's a bit mysterious, and it's a bit, a little bit fun. And so as a brand, I think it works because it's ticking a few boxes there. It's got how to get a name like a Martini Whisperer, which we could talk about one day. But so that gives them a way in, into spirits, into cocktail culture. That should be fun and gregarious. So the example I started a conversation around the event I did the other week, and by the time the end of the night was done, they were all best friends, which is kind of the point, isn't it? The whole point of hospitality, the whole point of cocktail culture, the whole point of great drinks is to create a really convivial atmosphere where you feel better, not because of the booze, but because of the company and ambience and what you experience. And they walked out going, "This is way better than we thought it was going to be. This is a fantastic night. Thanks so much." And that's music to my ears. So to build a brand around that means that it gives me lots of latitude, and I can leverage some of the cachet that the Martini represents. And so that was, I would say honestly, I couldn't sit back 5 years ago and design it that way. But that's where it's evolved now too. And so to answer to your question, I'm probably a lot more strategic the last few years, out of respect of the opportunities that have been coming my way, and try to be as professional about everything I do as I can. So when I write the articles, I want those articles to last, out of respect for the people who make the spirits, not just a quick grab. Mindful of the quality of the images I put up. I'm taking a lot of trouble with the videos, so that the brand is consistent and the experience that people get is the best quality I can offer. And so that, again, is an evolution thing, but it's also doing justice to what the brand promise is, and when you've got a title, when you're working with some of the Martini. If that makes sense.
So you explained there that the Martini emerged, and then you explained all the things around, why, I guess not all, but some things around why it's valuable and the demographic split and sort of what really makes being called the Martini Whisperer, honing in on the Martini, valuable. But you didn't realize that as it was growing. You explained there in your answer that you've come back around to that, going, oh, these are some things, like they're sort of your own. You've found those points as you've evolved the business, and that you couldn't, design it. I mean, maybe someone could, but I don't know. And maybe looking on a super long term scale, or not super long, because actually it'll all change on a really long timeline. Everything will adapt. Who knows? We might be drinking totally different drinks, but hopefully the cocktail industry is around for a long time, and spirits. I think it will be for a while. But I mean, I'm talking about super long timeline. But let's scale it back. Maybe someone can be strategic enough to design it from the get go. Not sure. I try to do as much strategic thinking as I can. With like, people ask me if I meditate, and I just call it deep thought. So do you have any practice that's like a really deep or strategic mentality you get into, and how do you get into that state?
That's a really great question, James. I used to study Zen years ago, and so my Zen practice is a little bit rusty these days, but I naturally incline my own thinking process to be strategic. I like being agile and the opportunities that come, and I say yes to most things, because I tend to find, even if they're a little bit left field, because I just find, partly it's momentum. You want momentum, and I'm on a bit of a roll right now. I have a whole bunch of things in the pipeline, which I'm really grateful for. But I'm also mindful of the fact that has to also be aligned in a certain way. I still need to, and if you're outside, this is, I guess, my point. You need to be able to sit outside your brand, sit outside your business, and just always keep a weather eye on how that looks and feels. We can always be in love with ourselves and love of our, our brand and what we're on about, because it feels good. Because when you're doing what you do and you love it, then the cliche is true. It doesn't feel like work. When I do my events and engage with my clients and customers, it feels fantastic because I just love what I do, and I get you get energy from it. But that aside, you've got to always have a weather eye and sit back and, well, how am I looking from the outside in? Am I getting too cocky here? Am I still adding value? This is really key. Am I still adding value? And it's not rocket science, clearly, but every single person who comes to one of my events, I really want to engage them and make sure they have a really nice experience, and it's probably better than they'd hope for. If I'm running review, I want to have some really genuine insights that people can really learn from, and gain some stuff. And the makers themselves, who give me the responsibility to interpret their product, they gain value from it as well. They're treated with respect. Those sort of values and keeping an eye on the brand, but it's consistent and it's harmonious and it's offering quality and value, I think is really, really key. When I do sit back, on my way around to your question, is that I think, well, where's this thing trending? What are these opportunities telling me about my business? Because some, what they say in the branding, they're saying branding, you don't own your brand, your customers own your brand, don't they? They're the ones who interpret and see you for who you are. You can put stuff out there, but at the end of the day, it's the customer who decides what your brand is worth. And so when I'm reflecting upon, we're talking today on a Sunday, that's my time of thinking ahead a month, 2 ahead, 3 months. I'm doing plans. I can tell you now, I want to do a Tokyo bar tour, Martini tour in Tokyo next year. So that's well advanced sort of thing. But it all has to align. It all has to reinforce the brand, and the opportunities that come your way, they're giving me clues and signals, and the relationships I'm building through other business partners or clients, they're telling me a lot about my business and my brand, where that's trending and where I need to adjust. So that keeps that real. You can dream all you want, but those are really strong data inputs that are really worth reflecting upon.
Yeah, it's interesting that saying that, because I get a lot of feedback from the same in the same way around strategic partners and clients, because I just find they know more internally about what I do and how I do it, that I'm just incredibly receptive to their feedback, because they also have similar demographics. Obviously, if they're strategic partners, they're going to have similar demographics. So I really need to listen to them, and you do the same thing. It's really cool to hear that too. There are tiny little things. Someone might mention something to you and you go, whoa, I didn't even think about doing that thing in that way at all. And then it could be an entire service that you offer. I've had that happen recently.
Yeah, well, that's right. And I alluded to the Tokyo trip. So And that came out of someone who came to my events, and he's a travel agent. He does these international tours as his core offering.
Yeah.
And he goes, how about, would you like to host such and such? Now, I'm the first to admit I've never been to Tokyo, so I've got a bit of research to do, and I've got some trips to do before we do lock it all in for real. But, I've got a contributor on my website who has a bar in Tokyo. I've got colleagues who know the distillers in Japan very well, etc. I've got those relationships. It's something we can really build and put together, and he's got those, he takes tours to Japan several times a year. Now, I would never, again, sit back and think that's a thing I should do. So I'll explore that, and hopefully we can pull that off and find style, and everyone has a great time. But I think if I'm not doing anything in terms of my area of working, I'm not being proactive enough. I'm not pitching enough. I confess, the opportunities are coming my way, and that's a really blessed, grateful place to be in. You've got to keep the momentum up yourself. And what I don't do enough probably is pitch enough, so to speak. But I'm also mindful I don't want to overcommit either. I've got plenty on my plate at the moment for the time being. But if I was to, next year, for example, I'm thinking, well, how can I be more proactive? And what does that mean, and where can I go? So that's kind of where my thinking process at the moment.
You said you don't pitch enough. Is that, I consider, even, because I send a lot of emails. Most of what I do is sending emails. And this kind of ties into something I thought before, which is around, do you see what sticks in people's minds, whether it's your business, if you're pitching to certain people, or concepts around things that you do or services that you offer, and even on a personal, more personally than that business, that brand itself, you could just explain some things about what you do. You throw everything out there, it's almost this shotgun approach. You throw everything out there, and then you see what sticks. And then if that resonates, you hone in really hard on that thing.
But I understand that. There's two ways of looking at that. In a previous life, I had a business events networking company for about a decade. I called it Schmooze. So it was, we did about 5-6 events a month, and it's definitely about building business relationships. But true to my style, I used to do it in cocktail bars and art galleries and places that didn't feel like networking. So there was no dodgy name tags and someone trying to sell you something. It was a very different way of doing business. Anyway, quite successful, but after 11 years, I wrapped it up. But what I learned fairly early on in the process was, people have got to know what you know. So I was out there networking, getting my business card out there, blah, 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 trying to build my consulting business up. And I was getting feedback like, Philip's a nice guy, but I don't know what he does. And I realized what I had to do then was hone in a bit more, be stronger in my narrative, in my professional brand. So, you in a conversational setting, you'd be like, so are you busy? Or everyone's always busy. I would also talk about sort of work I've been doing, or the clients I've been working with, so that people could go, oh, I didn't know you did that. Oh, you could do that, or whatever. In coming back to the Martini Whisperer, one thing I need to do is emphasize, and I do it every so often to, articles or postings that the events I might do or the services I can offer, is really make that very, very clear and explicit. Because in most things in life, the person you're talking to may not be in the market for what you're after, but they might be down the track, or they'll know someone who might be. And you want them to know what you can do with the value that you can bring. And if it's too much or too broad, then it gets lost in dilution, so to speak. So I think, my evolution of the Martini Whisperer now as a brand is getting pretty well established, is to really hone in on 3 or 4 key offerings and make that really well established and understood, and the value that can bring around that. Not excluding opportunities that come your way, but in terms of off-the-shelf kind of offerings, I want that to be a bit more sharper in relief, I think, so that it's quite clear the value that I can bring.
Totally. That makes total sense to me. I call those anchors. So I call them anchors. So, because I obviously, being an incredibly creative mind myself, I always had trouble with this idea that people would identify me as one thing, and I never wanted to be just identified as a bartender or a finance guy or an economist or a musician. Or I didn't want to be one of those things specifically, and I didn't want to be all of them together, because it didn't really do who I am justice to be called all of these things. But then I realized the value in honing in on actually choosing to pigeonhole myself as one of those things, only with respect to each person that I interact with. So I try to find out really quickly how they think and what they're interested in, and then pitch myself back in that way that resonates with their worldview. I think that's the way I've found to deal with it. And it sounds like you've done the same thing. You've got your key offerings someone comes, you meet someone and they go bang, 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 this is what I do. And then you'll explain yourself really well. You'll be able to come across as someone who maybe will be able to solve a problem that they have. You don't even have to directly sell that problem yet. You can just position yourself in a way that makes you able to present a solution to a problem that they might have.
Yeah, precisely. And when I hear that, it just reminds me of my early hospitality training, where you're learning to read people at table. You're learning to relate to them on their terms. You're still yourself, but you're the one being adaptable so that they can find their way to get what they need, and you're facilitating that. I think that the process is not dissimilar.
Absolutely. And there's incredible value for anyone listening who's in sales or marketing in the hospitality industry. Have a look at how hospitality professionals operate, the high-performing hospitality professionals anyway, because that's what we learn. So, we learn to adapt to every scenario. Every customer, doesn't matter who walks in, our job is to make them feel welcome and have a good time. So yeah, definitely there's an incredible amount of value in the hospitality industry. And I mean, for someone to be listening to this show, they're obviously interested in the hospitality industry, but I try to make it applicable to all facets of business, really. Definitely some nuggets of info there for you. I want to ask you, Philip, what are you learning about or exploring at the moment? Where are you pushing things or innovating?
Two things. Well, the main one is my TV series. This has been in development for a couple of years now, and it comes out of what we talked about earlier about the great personalities and stories and inspiration that sits behind craft distilling and cocktail culture in Australia. I looked around and no one was telling these stories in a TV format. So I've refined the concept and through some serendipitous meetings and some pitch. I did pitch this one in a position since Easter to have a national network very keen to run with the project. I can't go too much detail. And a production company out of Sydney who are very, very keen to run with it as well, who do TV shows we would probably all know. And that was really exciting. I refined the concept and the essence of it and the episode themes and so forth, and looked at what was around the world and what you see on Netflix or whatever, Amazon and Australian TV, and there was nothing quite like it. So anyway, before Easter, I was introduced to this company on the Thursday on an email, and on the Tuesday morning after Easter, I called back going, "We love it. Can you come in tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock for a chat?" You don't get those sort of calls very often. And so we had a real conversation on the phone about the ways it can be commercialized and the way the concept can be cut and diced. Anyway, so I was able to go up there and we got on great and talked about how it worked. And this is where it all kind of comes together a bit for me. So for a bit of fun, every month I do a Facebook Live broadcast on the Martini Whisperer Facebook page. And we'll go around and do bars, wherever I'm in Adelaide, Adelaide or Melbourne or Canberra particularly, a different theme. And we'll just basically rock up. We let them know we're coming just a few minutes in advance, what we're trying to do. And I was coming with a friend with an iPhone and order a martini and see what happens and talk about the bar, and it's all very casual and informal, not to put them under the spot or give them a hard time. It's just meant to just get a little snapshot of cocktail culture in these different places. Now that's just for fun, but other things that I've done for my events and them in film, that was really useful because they'd look me up, they saw what was on my website, they could see how I was in front of a camera, they could see my TEDx talk, all this kind of stuff. That was besides the formal pitch document you present to them, with all the facts and figures and the audience tone and how it might look, etc., and how it's going to be structured, they kind of do their due diligence and see what sort of guy Phillip Jones was. All that stuff added up. So that got me in the room. And so now we're at the point now where we're on the all-important fund search for money. So if you've got anybody listening who wants to invest in a TV series, please find me and talk to me.
Please do. I'll organise a link to do that as well.
It would be great if you could do that. And so it's a happening thing. I don't know when it's going to happen, but we're very committed to it. But these things don't come cheap, and we want to do it really, really well. So very high quality production values, and something really does justice to. And the essential idea is, how do you get from a bubbling spring in Tasmania, some of the most pure water in the world, through a distillation process and end up in a city bar into a magnificent cocktail? How does that happen? What's the ecosystem to make that happen? And so that's the sort of essence of the storylines we want to explore all around Australia, men and women, all types of spirits, and I've been researching heavily cocktail bars around Australia in the last few months and trying to get a read on some signature places that kind of speak to the cocktail culture of those places, whether it's Brisbane or Sydney or Melbourne or Canberra or whatever. And so we'll of wash up there as well and join the dots for people around that. It's a pretty exciting point to be. So I'm learning about all sorts of things you need to be, in front of a camera and all the rest of it, and how you put a TV series together. So that's a really amazing opportunity and challenge. It may not happen for months. It may happen next. I just don't know. So it's all in the hands of the TV gods, really. But I won't die wondering, so to speak. So it's exciting to get this far with it. And it's one of those things where it's in the works for years and suddenly, you get a call. So we'll just see how it plays out. I'm quite happy to talk about it, but also I don't want to host any expectations as well, because I just don't know when this thing's going to fall into place. But that's kind of where we're at the moment. So that's my big little baby. I'm kind of sitting on it for the moment.
Yeah, not a problem. It's something that's it's going to be very exciting. Obviously, we've had outside of this episode, we've had a bit of a chat about it, and it sounds very cool. And if anyone is if you're interested in seeing what's going on, Philip's got some really cool stuff coming up. So I'm super pumped to let you guys know about it once it does. I want to ask you, Philip, what innovations do you want to see take place in the industry?
I'm quite right behind the sustainability movement that's happening. So we're talking about bars for a minute, and then we'll talk about spirits. In the bar scene, there's a bar out in Singapore called Native. So if you get anybody who goes to Singapore, make sure they visit this bar called Native. It's down near employees only end of the town. Atlas, that magnificent deco bar with the 1,500 gins, is different work to do it, beside the point. But Native are deeply committed to no waste sustainability, to the point that they weigh their waste every day, and most of the time it's zero. Well, they'll take a photo on the Instagram and on the scales and be like 0.1 of a gram or something insane like that. I think for the times we live in, I think that is something to be commended, and it's a huge challenge for the industry to get behind. Straws are the things at the moment, and we're fixating on getting rid of plastic straws. So I think that in terms of innovation is a really interesting and a hard challenge. I'm not speeding up commercially; it could be very challenging for some operations to do, but I think that's something that's really worth exploring for the industry. And so it's got me reflecting upon how I go about, the events I do, for example, and stuff like that, to make as zero input as I can. And certainly, I'm in the privileged position of getting lots of samples sent to me and things like that, and I make sure I share those and use them in master classes, and nothing goes to waste and recycling, all these kind of things. So that's one. From a distilling point of view, around innovation, I think in the Australian market context, the different spirit categories are at slightly different stages, can we say. So the whiskey category is pretty well advanced and maturing, excuse the pun, in terms of its delivery, its product, its recognition. Australian gins and vodkas are a bit like where the Australian wine industry was about 20, 30 years ago. And by that I mean big, bold flavours. The quality across the board is high. It's challenged by that price point for the reasons we talked about earlier. But I think, people buying a bottle of Australian spirit generally won't be disappointed by it. But in terms of just sheer finesse and technical skill in making it, the reduction values are always pretty good. It's a question of taste, which ones you like, you don't like. But I think some of the flavours they're probably a bit broad still. I think they can be a bit polarising. So what I see a lot is people wanting to have a really strong personality or flavour profile expression in their spirits, which is to be commended. You've got to find your own voice. I get that. But the upside of that is that, yes, no doubt what you're drinking. The downside of that is that the flavour profiles could box a spirit in terms of versatility. So if I was a bar person running a bar or a restaurant or something, I go, I like this one, but what can I use it for? If I can use it in multiple cocktails or multiple situations, or as an e-good for one or two kind of permutations. So this is a challenge. So I think in terms of innovation, I think there's scope there still to explore other expressions in terms of flavour profiles. I'd also like to see smaller bottles, like half bottles, 375 models or smaller. It enables people then to try, if you like, before they buy a 700ml bottle. It sounds a bit strange to talk about that, but if you know what I mean, where some of the small operators are smart at doing this, because people can love the idea of Australian spirits, but they can't coffee up $80, $90, $120 sometimes for a bottle. But they pay $20, $30 for a little sample and go, oh, this is great, because they want to try it, but they've got to justify it themselves. So I would like to see more of those sort of smaller offerings so that people can find their way into the category, see what they like, and so on. As a side note, I was involved with a advent calendar, those advent boxes, like a spirit box, for Christmas. And a gentleman called David Box, he's a company called Gin Tonica out of Melbourne. And so I collaborated with him to put together this advent calendar for last Christmas. And it has gins. So you got December 1, you open up a little box and there's a little bottle of Australian gin in it. It's great fun. And it's sold like hotcakes. We did really, really well. And I did the tasting notes for the for each product. And that was great because you got a little 50ml gin. So you've got like 25, 30 Australian gins in this box, 50ml little bottles. They're all beautifully labelled. And that was a great way for people to meet a brand they'd never met before. And I think stuff like that is really cool. So anything that the makers can do to make their product accessible is where it needs to be, right?
Sustainability's come up so much in the show. It's obviously a trend happening at the moment, and I've mentioned that. And then I liked your answers there around how making it more accessible, I guess. So that's sort of the two themes that I really got from your answer there. So one was a marketing answer and one was a technical answer as well. So it's very cool. I like that. Obviously, we're zero waste here with Horsepreneurs. So if you anyone listening at home wants to have zero waste, start a podcast. Problem solved. No, for real though, there's actually there's a huge movement around sustainability in hospitality at the moment, and yeah, we're definitely behind doing that. So I'd love to have a guest if you're listening at home and you are doing something with sustainability, like a big movement, like the guys with Trash Tiki and whatnot. I was having a chat with Ian Griffiths about it, but that'd be awesome to do an episode on something like that.
I think, James, a gentleman called Peter Bignell from Bygrove Distillery in Tasmania, and he's probably the most sustainable distiller in the world, frankly. Fifth generation Tasmanian farmer. He makes exquisite rye and other things. And it's a long story in and of itself, but his little party trick is he goes to these sustainable wine events, natural wine, and he was in France recently. He did one in it's got a name in Sydney. I can't think of it right now. But anyway, the slops from the tasting, and people spit out the wine, right? So you imagine how horrible that is. Just a huge bucket of people's spitting, because he doesn't believe in any waste at all. He's completely committed to zero waste and sustainability. He turns that into spirits. Yeah. So because through the distillation process, so in the Sydney one, he did it in France on site, and the one in Sydney a couple of years ago, I can't think of the name of it, Kissing a Stranger or something like that, I think it was called. A bit of a party trick, just to make the point that, well, once it's through distillation process, it's pure as pure, and so he turned it into gin or something like that, and people could drink it and buy it. Because the mines, going through your mines, be like kind of drinking recycled water, a sewage treatment plant. But that's his commitment. So he didn't want to see any of that go to waste. He turned into a spirit. So that can happen.
Yeah, I really like that. I might explore that.
Yeah, Peter Bignell, he's a legend. Yeah.
He's been mentioned twice before on the show too, so I think I'm gonna have to get in contact. I want to ask you, Phillip, because we're getting close to the end of the episode, what is your number one industry resource? So where do you look to for information or advice?
Oh, put the man on the spot, don't you? My wife calls me a maven, and by that I mean I get lots of different information. I'm a bit like yourself. I've had lots of different careers and different hats, and so so you can talk about social media and getting visually inspired here and everywhere, but I think at the end of the day, it's talking to other people. It's conversations like this. It's getting out there and staying connected to the people in your professional community. And I'm a confession to make, a bit of an introvert, really. So I like to come home and cuddle my dog and make a nice drink and get in for the night. But the good stuff is always out there. The good stuff is actually turning up, meeting people, being open, having conversations, staying connected to the industry on the floor. And I think that's where it's really at, frankly, because then you can hear what's really happening on the ground, the state of the office. This is where you can hear the theory tested around sustainability, for example. It's where you can see where the challenges are for people and so forth. So I'll be heading down to the Australian Distillers Association conference later this year. I was there last year doing research for the series and doing interviews. Again, that's the real stuff. You hear these guys talking about the graph that they do, and they're very, very open and collaborative. They're all in the same boat together, and they all work their guts out and have all these challenges. That's absolute gold for me, because it means then I can go away and then contextualize it and see the bigger picture and see where these trends are going. So yeah, bottom line is staying connected to your people around you and showing up. So that's one.
In that answer, some people don't see the things that you might see. So how do you convey that to someone else? Because there are many times that I'll explain something to someone and go, "Oh, can't you see that thing in that scenario?" And they didn't see that. How would you go about describing how someone can see some of those things? Maybe they've got their own. The thing is, everyone's got their own unique perspective on the world, And so we're not going to see the same things. But how can we teach people to be receptive to the things that they might see that other people don't?
I could use phrases like active listening and being empathetic and so forth, but it's really about just shutting up and listening. And so if you're in a bar, if you're an industry event or something like that, these things are quite conversational. And instead of pushing your own line and talking about what you're doing so much, it's really about listening to the other person and being open and responsive to what comes your way. You're always going to internalize and process that information that comes to you in your own way. And as a manifestation of how I then turn that into something, if I'm doing a review of a spirit, then one thing that I'm very keen to do, or a bar or a person, something is to give them the contextualize the moment, or contextualize where those spirits sitting in. So if we're talking about Swedish spirit, what's the scene in Sweden at the moment, or what's that about? And so putting things into context, I think, is really critical. But that's after a period of reflection and research. In terms of sheer practical advice, I think it is just simply listening and not imposing yourself on the situation. If you follow, for World Gin Day, we did a fundal event down here. It's put on by a local distillery called Underground Spirits, and I did a guest appearance, which was very nice of them to invite me. But it was all the local media and food bloggers and stuff, so it was like an industry event. I just spent the time just trying to be as interested as I possibly could about what these other people were on about and what they're interested in and so forth. And out of that, I came away with a bit of a picture of where, that particular industry and what the trends are and things like that. And if I was to spend the whole time talking about how fabulous I was, not what I would, but you know what I mean, I would never gain those insights. So yeah, just shut up and, ask a few interesting questions and then go away and contemplate it and contextualize it in what ways that make sense to you.
Yes, as you said there, that's what active listening is about. But people don't really get people don't really understand what active listening really means. And the way that I describe it is just, and I'll elaborate on this, is being present. Like if you're entirely present in the conversation, in the scenario, then that is what allows you to listen actively. What that presence means, this is how I describe it to other people. Being present in a conversation means making the other person you're engaging with the center of the universe for the conversation.
Absolutely.
That is what makes someone present in the conversation. So that's how I describe it to other people. If you make the other person the center of the universe for the conversation, you will be present, and it will allow you to gain insights that you would not have otherwise gained.
Absolutely. Amen to that. Put the phone away, look in their eyes, talk to them, be there.
Well, thanks for that. Thanks for that, Philip. I've had that little spark from what you said there, so thank you. I want to ask you, ultimately, where do you want to be, and what are you doing to achieve that?
Oh, $64,000 question. Well, besides, being famous on TV and washing up on Food Channel and reruns at 2:00 in the morning, 5 years now.
I like that.
Look, if I can pull that off, then I can die a happy man. It's not a vanity thing, honestly. It's about, this is a story that's worth telling, and it needs to be told right and well, and it's a natural evolution of all that I've been working on for several years. So there's that. If that comes off, then that's a whole different trajectory, I guess, in a career sense. But, as I say, you never quit your day job. I still think with the Martini Whisperer brand, it's still got lots of legs. So I really want to add more voices to the website and look at ways to enhance that next year. I'm going to do a lot more video. So some of my homework in the next several months is to, besides the in-depth articles, is do some nice, simple quality review productions, recognising that people, like those and short grabs, enhance that offering more and more to make it more accessible in terms of content. So I can see the whole content really evolving quite a lot over next year into more like a magazine kind of format, I guess. But I think around that, again, it's people who do really good stuff out there, but I think I've got some interesting voices and perspective I can bring to bear around that. So you're going to see a lot more of that. And I guess just in terms of like the travel stuff. So doing a program of events around Australia and London and Tokyo and maybe LA, Palm Springs. So I'm aiming to set up, some relationships and events around that, where basically these are sort of guest appearances, I mentioned it was from Martini master classes, very bespoke events around that. So I'm having some conversation with people around that. Regardless of what happens with the series, I'm adamant that, I'm not going to lose sight of the potential and the opportunity that the brand offers. And I think, quite honestly, without saying a cliche, it's only just going to get going. There's lots of ways to cut and dice it, and even though the craft spirit sector is still quite modest in terms, we talked before about in terms of economic value and in terms of the overall market share, that's going to grow, and there aren't too many people in that space who do what I do, I think, so, and do the way I do it. So I think that there's still quite a lot of potential yet to be realised. So I don't want to spread myself too thin. So I guess to bring it back would be to deepen and richer the current offering and to expand the event program, and then touch wood, then the other thing happens, and that's going to complement it really powerfully. So that's kind of where I want to go.
Fantastic. So in that, and this is the last question, I always like to end with this. Well, not always, but most of the time. What is the next step for you?
At the end of the day, as I say in Zen, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. It's cool business. It's writing the reviews. I've got a bit of a backlog of poor distillers waiting for me to finish things off. I've got these videos to produce. I can't do and get ready for the ADA conference and do a bunch of work around that, some videos and interviews and things like that, and just keep the National Spirit Flame alive, which is the working title for the series, and do what I can in the background to keep that viable. It's a little bit out of my hands at the moment, but I'll do what I can. So at the end of the day, yeah, right now after this, it's back to work. It's back to work, and keep it every day, because it doesn't just happen, and you just don't set cruise. Oh, I've made it. And set cruise control on it, and it doesn't happen. You've got to commit to continuous improvement, continuously evolving, and like I said before, just really listening and staying close to what your customers and your clients and your partners are telling you about where this thing can go and how you can do it in quality that adds some value.
100%. Well, awesome. Thank you for being on the show today, Philip. It's been fantastic having you on, and I really enjoyed our chat, and I'm looking forward to the film and seeing what sort of cool, exciting, weird, wonderful things you come up with.
It's an absolute honour, James, and thank you so much for thinking of me. It's been great to talk to you too.
The show today was produced by Angus Brennan. If you'd like to know more about Hospopreneurs, for advice, insights, and extra content, find us at hospopreneurs.com. Thanks for listening.